Welcome to the Dash Mindset Podcast. I'm Sherry Zievenbergen. You were born, you're gonna die, and your adventure is your dash in between. So make the most of it. Unlock your potential in all aspects of your dash by embracing your uniqueness and living in a way that's authentic to you, not by doing more things, but by focusing on the right things. I'm a former corporate leader turned coach who's on my own journey, and I'm passionate about helping you on your journey too. So on the podcast, we'll explore how to live authentically by deciphering who you truly are and what you truly want. Are you ready to take a step toward designing your dash? Someday doesn't actually exist, so let's do it now. Hey, I'm tagging on this super awkward, weird, unplanned intro that I'm recording from my car because without it, this episode isn't going to make a lot of sense. The whole point of this episode is to provide some context, and I'm now going to provide some context about the context that I failed to provide. I was just listening to the finalized episode done by the amazing Ian, who edits my podcast episode. My apologies, Ian. This is going to be very painful for you to add. But it occurred to me, I failed to explain what the heck YouMap is. The whole point of this episode is to talk about what YouMap does and to talk about one of the pillars of YouMap, but I don't even explain what the heck it is. So here we go. YouMap. It's one of the frameworks I use that really helps people understand who they are, what they naturally do well, what motivates them, how they're wired, and what's most important to them. And the whole point of using YouMap is to help people live and work with more intention. So it's a matter of digging in and helping people better understand themselves. That is what the framework does. And so there's the context about the context you're about to hear. My apologies to Ian and a shout out to my friend Steve Fredland, who was on the prior episode and talked about doing the end right thing. This is an example, folks. The end right thing right here. Enjoy the rest of the podcast if you're sticking around. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Dash Mindset Podcast. Thank you for listening today. Today, I'm going to provide a little bit of context regarding some of the topics I've spoken about in the past. So, if you have ever felt misunderstood, if you have ever felt as if you have misunderstood someone else, if you feel off in any part of your life and you just can't quite put your finger on what exactly it is, or you have a sense of what it might be, but you're just not quite sure, I invite you to listen to the rest of the podcast because I'm going to be talking about a particular tool I use. And that's just, more context about some of the topics I've talked about before. I have a tendency to just kind of jump in, talk about, topics and not necessarily always provide all the context. So if you're not a context person, this might make your skin crawl. If you are, join me. Welcome. And maybe just listen to parts. I don't know. But I'm going to talk about YouMap. And I'm really passionate about YouMap, which is one of the primary tools I use because it has significantly impacted my life in a positive way. And it has impacted the people I've worked with as well. So I love it. I have been an assessment junkie since I was old enough to buy Teen Beat. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're just far younger than I am. But I love assessments. And so when I heard about YouMap, I thought, okay, what's this assessment going to do for me that I haven't already experienced in the past? And what it allowed me to do was to see a more comprehensive understanding of who I am, because each assessment I had taken prior to that had provided a slice of information about me. But YouMap allows me to have a more holistic perspective. So I talk about this a lot in episode 2, because in episode 2, I have a conversation with the developer of YouMap, Kristen A, a remarkable human. She's actually the one who certified me in YouMap. And so you can listen to our entertaining conversation and learn far more about it in episode 2, where she and I have a discussion. But to provide a little more context here, she has coached thousands of people, and she too felt as if she was missing something because she was working with her clients on several different assessments, none of which was providing the holistic perspective she really wanted. So she is actually certified in 10-ish different assessments and has determined that YouMap is really what provides the overall perspective that helps our clients the most. So that's what I'm using now. So YouMap is a tool that basically allows us to live more intention, to act more intentionally throughout all aspects of our lives. When we're aligned with those things and we're living and working in alignment with those things, life is good. We're fulfilled. We're happy. We're all the good things. And when we're misaligned, we're not. We're more stressed. We have more unhealthy conflict. We're more burned out. So I really enjoy working with YouMap because it provides that comprehensive perspective, as I said, but it's also really practical and it provides actionable insights. So that's the overall context about the overall tool. Now I'm going to provide more context about one of the specific pieces of YouMap, one of the specific pillars, which is strengths. So you might be familiar with StrengthsFinder. It was created based on over 40 years of research by Gallup, the Gallup organization. And if you're not familiar with Gallup, I really encourage you to just investigate some of their research if you're into that kind of thing. I eat this stuff up, so I'm always looking into Gallup. But so Gallup created YouMap based on a ton of research. Or I'm sorry, Gallup created StrengthsFinder based on a ton of research. Kristen Sherry created YouMap. Okay, so back to Gallup. So Gallup created StrengthsFinder. And so when Sherry created YouMap, or Kristen created YouMap, she didn't want to recreate the wheel. What's the point of that? So she used Gallup StrengthsFinder. And that's what continues to be used within the YouMap today. But so about StrengthsFinder. StrengthsFinder is an amazing assessment because it really allows people to focus on what's right with them. And so often we're focused on what we believe to be wrong with us, or potentially what others believe to be wrong with us. And our differences in strengths are often what lead to those misunderstandings that you may be experiencing or may have experienced in the past, whether you're feeling misunderstood or whether you're misunderstanding someone else. Those misunderstandings are very often due to our differences in our strengths, because our strengths they're just natural to us. And we really don't even realize that we're doing it because it's just the way we live life. So our strengths are our natural talents. Those are just what we naturally do well. They're different from skills in that skills can be learned. And definitely we can learn talents as well, but our strengths are specific to what we naturally do well. So the assessment allows us to determine what our top 5 strengths are, because those are things that we don't need to learn. It's just how we do life. Okay. So not understanding our own strengths, which is often the case because we're human and we don't even recognize the way we operate, not understanding those strengths leads to even more misunderstandings because we can't even see it ourselves. And we really don't even recognize the fact that other people have a reason for operating the way they're operating because we're not seeing their strengths either. So StrengthsFinder has determined there to be 34 strengths overall. And so they've taken human strengths and they've put them into 34 different buckets. One thing I want to emphasize about this, because oftentimes people are somewhat opposed to assessments because they think they're going to be put into a bucket as well, or put into a box, or be framed a particular way that's going to limit them. One thing I want to emphasize is that my perspective is much different than that. We can be put into a box if that's what we choose. What I choose to do with assessment results is just help people better understand themselves and be able to do something with the information. Others might put you in a box, right? They're doing that already. So always being judged. We're always being put into a box by other people. So what I love about these assessments is that we have the choice of what we want to do with the results. And we can actually do something that's going to serve us and serve others. So it's really up to us what we do with the results. So StrengthsFinder has 34 different strengths. We can allow those to box us in or not. I choose to not be boxed in by them. And when the assessment is taken, it says, okay, here are your top 5 strengths. Here are the strengths that are most natural to you. Here's just basically how you live life. So there are 34 of them. And oftentimes when people take the assessment, they decide, these other 29 strengths that are not my top 5 must be things I suck at. No. And that's just natural for us, right? To think, oh, these other things that are not considered strengths must be weaknesses. We need to focus on that. No, I invite you to focus on, if and when you take the assessment, I invite you to focus on your top 5 and just lean into those even more, because that's what's going to bring more fulfillment. That's what's going to create more happiness in your life. And that's going to better serve other people as well. Our tendency, especially when we don't even understand our strengths, our tendency is to focus on what we believe to be wrong with us. And that is exhausting. And it really doesn't benefit anyone. So that's what I love the most about this tool, about StrengthsFinder, is that it helps people identify what's right with them and to lean into those things even more. I also want to emphasize that whatever somebody's top 5 strengths are, those top 5 strengths are incredible for that person. There is no strength that is any better than any other. And each combination is unique to us. So my top 5 strengths are different than most people's top 5 strengths. And certainly the order of my strengths is different. So there is one other person out of 33 million people who has the same combination of my top 5 strengths, which is just miraculous to me, right? We know that we're each a snowflake. We've probably been told that. But truly, each of us is a snowflake, not just because of our strengths, but because of everything else about us. But truly, we are snowflakes. And I really, really, really love to help people understand how they are a particular snowflake and help them understand what specifically is unique about them, what specifically is right with them. And so StrengthsFinder is a great way to do that. So when I work with people on their strengths in particular, I really like to help them understand what the outcome of identifying their strengths is and what the outcome of actually leaning into those strengths is. So whether it's from a work standpoint or a personal standpoint, it increases our productivity when we lean into those strengths. It increases our quality of life. Things just become easier. We're not trying as hard because we're focusing on the things that we already do well. We're just more engaged, whether it's at work or at home. From a personal and professional standpoint, we're more engaged, and it just increases our quality of life overall. It also decreases our stress level, and it decreases our tendency to burn out. So now I want to talk about the 4 categories that those 34 strengths are categorized into. Okay, I'm not going to get into the weeds here about each category of strengths, but I just want to provide an overview of each of those 4 categories so you have a better understanding of what some of the differences between the strengths are. So the first category, and these aren't in any particular order, this is just the first category I'm explaining. Those are relating strengths. And relating strengths explain how people build connections with others. People who have more relating strengths than other strengths have a tendency to form deeper connections. It's just what they naturally do. Now, that does not mean People who don't have relating strengths or don't have as many relating strengths are incapable of connecting with other humans. It does not mean they're not people. It just means it's not as natural for them. Those are relating strengths. Influencing strengths explain how a person moves other people to action. So people with influencing strengths tend to work through people to accomplish goals. They prefer working with a variety of people. They don't want to see the same people necessarily every day. Every day in, day out, they don't necessarily want to work with the same people all the time. They generally have a broader network, and they generally develop fewer, deeper connections than people who have more relating strengths. It does not mean that, they're limited to a certain number of connections. It just means they have a tendency to develop fewer, deeper connections. And people with influencing strengths are just generally more comfortable influencing and persuading other people. That does not mean people without influencing strengths are incapable of influencing. It simply means it's more natural for people with influencing strengths. Okay, so we've talked about relating strengths. We've talked about influencing strengths. There are two more categories, and those are executing strengths and thinking strengths. Executing strengths is actually, I spoke about those in episode 23, and it's something I didn't provide a ton of context about because in episode 23, I was really focused on a couple specific executing strengths, which we often beat ourselves up about if we don't have. Those two strengths that I focused primarily on were focus and discipline. Focus is something that I think most of us in society these days feel like we're lacking because we're bombarded with information all the time. And I actually received, one of the reasons why I'm doing this particular episode is because I received so much positive feedback about that particular episode from people who had been beating themselves up because they're feeling like they don't get things done. So if you want more information or just to hear more all around about executing strengths, I encourage you to listen to episode 23. But overall, what executing strengths are is those are the strengths that explain how a person pushes toward results, how a person gets things done. So influencing strengths are focused on how a person moves other people toward results. Executing strengths are how we push ourselves toward results. People with executing strengths like to get things done. And they actually put plans into action. And I would say, most people like to get things done, right? But people with a lot of executing strengths, they have more of a need. They feel compelled to get things done. They have a preference, generally speaking, to work independently to accomplish something. And they often have a hard time delegating because they feel like they should be able to do it all. And it's really it's a rewarding experience with someone with executing strengths accomplishes a goal and gets things done. And sometimes delegating almost feels like, I don't know, like you're breaking some rules or something. It feels like it's just not the right thing to do because as an executor or as a person with primarily executing strengths, it feels like you should be able to do everything yourself, right? So people with executing strengths have a tendency to get burned out more often than other people with fewer of those executing strengths. So that's executing strengths. Now I'm going to move into thinking strengths. So thinking strengths are how a person views the world. It's how a person analyzes the world. People with thinking strengths are the type of people that prefer mental work. So I'll use an example. If you see someone, and there's that brainy scientist who has like piles of books behind him, that person is likely someone who has a lot of thinking strengths. They prefer the mental activity. They prefer the mental work, especially if they have 2 or more thinking strengths. And those people are often considered to be quietly effective. Sometimes the people with the thinking strengths, they're the ones who are sitting at their desks in a work setting. They're sitting at their desks just thinking. And it might appear to others as if they're not doing a damn thing. It might appear as if they're being lazy, as if they're not getting anything done. However, they are. They're absolutely getting things done. It's just in their head. They're coming up with all kinds of stuff in their head, and they can be very influential. It's just the work is going on in their head, and it's harder to see. So sometimes those people are challenged in a work setting because it's going to appear as if they're not getting anything done when they absolutely are. And it's going to appear more so that they're not getting anything done by those people who have primarily executing strengths, because they're just thinking, okay, I should be able to do it all. You should be able to do it all. And so it's going to appear as if those people who are doing all the work in their head, it's going to appear as if they're not getting anything done. That's just one example of how our differences in strengths can lead to misunderstandings. Misunderstandings are happening all the time. Sometimes we don't even know. And it's often due to a difference in strengths because we have a tendency to think everyone should be operating the same way we are. And it just doesn't make sense to us when they don't, right? So I hope you have a better understanding of strengths overall, and the fact that really understanding your strengths, leaning into those strengths is going to benefit you as well as others. Who doesn't want to reduce the number of misunderstandings in life? We have enough of those, right? We have enough. It causes additional challenges that we just don't need. So I invite you to work with me if you have any interest in learning more about your strengths, understanding how you do what you do, and also if you have any interest in understanding why you do what you do, understanding your values, understanding what you actually like to do, what you dislike doing, what might be draining you. If you'd like to have a better understanding of your personality, what your interests are, how you're wired, I invite you to reach out to me, see if we're a good fit, and I would love to help you with that. I would love you to identify what's right with you, lean into that, and release those things that aren't, and stop focusing on your weaknesses. So I hope this is helpful. I'll dig in a little bit deeper to some of these in additional episodes. If you're interested in hearing more about some of the executing strengths in particular, listen to episode 23. And to hear more about the amazing Kristen Sherry and the YouMap tool that I went through at a very high level, listen to episode 2. I will see you soon, and I hope you have a great couple weeks in the meantime. Thanks so much for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player, tell your friends, and leave us a review. Follow me on my social media platforms highlighted in the show notes, and get in touch with me at thedashmindset.com. Share the topics you'd like me to explore in future episodes. Thanks again for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. We'll see you next time. Design and differentiate your Dash your way and make today amazing.